here for TestGeek Exam Prep, the Series 24 video course. Let's just go through a little introduction as to what the test entails, best ways to study for it. The 24 is probably described as one of the most challenging exams for several different reasons. Let's first look at the content that you're expected to see. Okay. First, we're going to look at the general registration of the broker-dealer and its representatives. Okay. A whopping 9 questions there. Then the supervision of general broker-dealer activities. It is by far the largest portion of the exam that you expect to see. There'll be 45 questions in total. Okay. The next area that you can expect to see is the supervision of activities for retail and institutional activities. 32 questions. Trading and market making activities. Now, as long as I've been doing this, probably one of the most challenging parts of the 24 is the trading securities. A lot of people, the irony of it all, a lot of people who go through the Series 24 don't do a whole lot of this activity, trading individual securities, market making activities, those sorts of things. But you know, it is a significant part of the test, and it's one of the areas in which you must be diligent. The other one is the underwriting and investment banking, another area that I don't see a lot of people through my class involved in a lot of underwriting. So another investment banking, another section that oftentimes give people difficulties. These are the two areas that when I see someone's score sheet at the end of the test, these generally tend to be the lowest. So there are always areas that I like to concentrate on the most. That way you can have, hopefully, a little better idea of what to expect when you see these questions. So we've got a total of 150 questions that are graded, and I'm sure you've been through these FINRA exams before. You know that they often add experimental questions to that. Okay? Now, of the 150 questions that are graded, you must answer any 105 correctly. That is a passing score of 70%. One of the few exams remaining that have a 70% passing score. Now, check this out. You have a total of 3 hours and 45 minutes to complete the exam, which I think is far too much time. No one should have a problem answering 150 questions in nearly 4 hours of time. Now, I also tell people that it is the longest single session of any exam. We know the Series 7 is 6 hours, right? But it's broken into 2 3-hour sessions. So you're never sitting in front of the computer for more than 3 hours. So this one is by far the largest single section of any exam. Now, what I tell people, a couple of things, is it really shouldn't take you that long. I tell people in every class, in every exam that they take, that if you're bumping up against the time for some of these exams, it's usually not a good sign, right? You don't want to overanalyze this stuff to death, because often what you're going to do is just going to fall for their little tricks, okay? Awesome. Second thing, since it is so long, I oftentimes will recommend to people, halfway through the exam, which let's say question number 75, raise your hand and say, I have to go to the restroom. Just get up, walk away, get a drink of water, go to the restroom, whatever you want to do, just to kind of refocus your eyes a little bit, give your brain a little rest from staring at that computer. Come back, you're a little bit refreshed, you have a little different perspective, right, so that you can be a little bit more re-energized to go through that second half of the exam. That should be more than enough time. It should not take you anywhere near 3 hours and 45 minutes. The average is probably shy of 3 hours, probably 245, 250, something like that, not including going back and reviewing questions. And we'll talk about that later too, because that's an important issue. Now, as with every exam, those of you taking the 24 course are seasoned, you're experienced at taking these exams. Now, if you've taken your Series 7 within the last 6 to 12 months, that's a good thing, because you'll see a lot of overlap. You're still kind of in the test-taking mode, right? So a lot of those same skills that you use to pass the Series 7 and some of the concepts you will also see on the 24 as well, okay? Now, if it's been a while since you've taken one of these exams, okay, let's kind of take a minute and discuss how best to pass this thing. First, this content will probably have absolutely nothing to do with what you do in the real world. Don't try to equate what you do on a daily basis to any of this stuff. You know that very rarely ever works, okay? Remember, these are just gatekeepers to the industry. They're very diverse questions. They cover a lot of different aspects in the industry that you may or probably may not be involved in on a daily basis. So, let's take a look at how we should best tackle this thing, shall we? How to study. Now, that shouldn't be a revelation to many of us, okay? You get the textbook. And many of the textbook publishers now provide videos along with that textbook. So, you know, you can actually hear somebody speak it to you. You know, some people are visual, some are audio, some folks don't like to read a whole lot. So a combination of both, or whichever is your strongest suit. I like to read. I've always been a reader. That's how I've always been able to do these things. As a matter of fact, I often like to tell people that when I first got in the industry, this is the only thing I had in order to pass any of the exams is the textbooks. I never had any live classes. I never had any online practice questions, never had any video courses. I didn't have any of those things, just the textbook. So I oftentimes would read through that textbook several times. Now, several times because, you know, I love to read, but you take a 400-page textbook, read it cover to cover, how much of that are you going to retain? Probably not a whole lot, right? So, we want to break this down, okay? Unit 1. Read and or watch their corresponding videos. I know Kaplan, STC, who is it, Past Perfect, a lot of these guys have corresponding videos to go with each one of those sessions. So, just take Unit 1. Then, they also have practice questions in that section. So once you've read the units, then you want to go into the practice questions, the Q&As, and probably do 20 questions on Unit 1. And that's all, not too many. Okay? We just want to help reinforce so that we can retain this information. Right? Then, again, read, or the videos, whatever, Unit 2. And then get into the 20 questions. Now, here's where the publishers, the different publishers, kind of vary a little bit. Okay? If they allow you to customize your exams, I know some of the publishers do. I think it's a really good advantage if they allow you to customize your exams for many different reasons. This is one reason. Another reason is once you identify some weak areas, you can go back specific to that particular content area and work on that weak area. So if it allows you to customize, once you've completed Unit 2 and the 20 practice questions, what I like to do is then to do 25 questions on units 1 and 2, right? So what we're doing is reinforcing and building, building and reinforcing, building and reinforcing. And then of course you just go through each subsequent unit, repeat the process, slowly building your knowledge base. And then 30 questions on units 1 through 3. If again, it allows you to customize this, okay? And you just do this throughout all the units. Most of them will probably correspond with these 5 different content areas, Q&A, 20 questions, and then let's say 50 questions on units 1 through 4, okay? And then unit 5. So basically, again, you just building, reinforcing, building, reinforcing. I refer to it as my inverted pyramid. You start small and then you gradually expand your knowledge base. Okay? I think that is the most efficient, most effective way to obtain and retain the content material. Okay? Now, once you've completed all of that, you'd like to do some sort of practice exam, depending on, again, the material, whether it's a Kaplan or an STC or a Pass Perfect or whomever. They all provide those practice exams, or simulated exams, or whatever they call it. Okay? And it will typically score it for you. Let's give you a good passing score, shall we? The 72%. Now again, if the publishers, usually they will then break out that score into the different components, thus showing where your strengths and weaknesses are. See, that's why I like the customized practice questions. So if you see Unit 4, Trading and Market Making, then you can go back into the Q&As specific to that particular content area. Okay? Now, once you've gotten through that, the next step in this process I like is taking the class. Okay? TestGeek exam preps video course would be perfect right here. Okay? Or if you have the ability to do a live class. Live classes are, a little thin these days. You don't see them, especially the 24. The 24 typically only in the largest of cities, New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, those kind of things. So this would be an excellent video course to help you reinforce these contents. Now, again, any class that you take, you got to make sure that they offer a bridge between the content that you're reading in the textbook and the real test. Because, as you know from all your past exams, the real test is slightly different than the practice questions that you've been working on. They are not the same. No one by law is allowed to duplicate test questions. So that's exactly what the class is meant to do, is to provide that bridge between the textbook materials and the real test. And I'm going to be quite honest with you as well. The gap between the textbook publishers and the real exam tends to be a pretty wide gulf, according to a lot of feedback. Okay? Now, here's what I'll tell you. All the concepts that you typically will see in these textbooks will be on the test. It's just the way in which they're worded and asked. Oftentimes, in the textbook, in the publisher's practice questions, that they tend to be more definitional, where on the real test, they are applications. I generally tell people that the exam and FINRA, who writes the exam, already assume you know the rules. So what the test will do is to ask you to apply the rules to the test questions. So they're application. They're almost like case studies. And that's what the textbook publishers don't typically simulate very well. Also, I can also tell you that you often see a lot of Roman numeral questions in these practice questions. Guess how many you get on the real test? 0. There are no Roman numeral questions on the Series 24 exam, right? Kind of probably a little surprise for you. I'll repeat that. There are no Roman numeral questions on the Series 24. Also, very little to no math. You might touch a calculator once, maybe twice, but generally, most people don't use a calculator at all on the Series 24. Okay? So there's a couple of differences as well. The biggest difference, again, is FINRA already assumes you know the rules, and they ask you to apply them in these kind of case study application type questions. Okay? So the class, hopefully, is going to help you bridge that gap. That's what we're attempting to do. Any class that you see or take, whether it be TestGeeks or someone else's out there, make sure that it's a bridge between what's on the real test versus what's in the textbook. Okay? Now, also, like every test, keep it simple. You know how these questions are designed. They are often included with distractors and ambiguous synonyms to kind of throw you off the track, right? So, if you start to overanalyze, right, start getting paralyzed by all of that content, that's when you start running into this time difficulty. So you got to keep it simple. Stay with what you know. You take the test. Don't let the test take you. Okay? So that's the next step, is to take that class, help consolidate the most testable concepts that you expect to see on the test. Okay? Then, after that step, of course, you want to simulate the test-taking environment the best the law allows. And again, the different text publishers, the Kaplans, the STCs, the Past Perfects, training consultants, Exam FX, all these other guys. Hopefully we're trying to find some practice finals that will correlate very closely to what you'll score on the real test. Now, generally, I try to stay publisher neutral, okay? But I also will tell people that those who have been in this the longest are usually the best at it. And the two oldest that I know of are Kaplan and STC. They've been around this forever. And I know that their practice finals, although they're structured a little differently from one another, they very generally will correlate plus or minus 5 to 7% to what you score on the real test. Okay? So it's in kind of a little narrow range is what you want, right? So you can get an idea as to where you're going to be on the real test. Okay? So basically 3 steps, right? Getting through the textbook, this is the longest, most difficult, getting through the textbooks and all the practice questions. Okay? Then of course, once you've completed all of that, you want to take the class. Don't generally substitute that for this. Okay? These classes are not meant to be a substitute for pouring through that material. I know we're all busy. I know time is of the essence. But man, you really don't want to kind of skirt through these exams. You want to make sure you get through this thing the first time. We don't want to go through this the second time, right? So, step 1, step 2, and then practice finals. I like at least 3 of them, if not 4 of them, to give you kind of a good database of where you'll be. And obviously you want to be scoring at least in the mid-70s, if not higher. Okay? And again, once you go through those practice finals, they give you this feedback, where the weak areas are. Man, that's crucial. I love that stuff, right? And so one thing I never had when I took all of my exams way back in the dark ages, I never had that kind of feedback, where my weak areas are. So that I can then go back into the practice questions. Again, if they allow you to customize these exams, they go back into those weak areas to kind of ramp up on those weak areas, and hopefully those practice scores start to increase a little bit. Okay? So that's best how to study this thing. We're going to be right back here. We'll get right into the content. I'll see you soon. Take care.